From Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 years, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Ben Ark from LN Bits.
Hello, everybody. Good evening.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue 1. The price of Bitcoin is $86,694. That's $1 for 1,154 Satoshis, just on the wrong side of the 1,000 Satoshi barrier. That's down 3% in the last 24 hours, with a high of 91,454 and a low of 80,876, with a volume of 1,358 Bitcoins changing hands. Yes, the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve is here. Trump signs order to establish Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. But it might not be what you want. Let's watch Trump sign the order. Here it is from Twitter.
Today we're signing, this is a very historic and executive order establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve and digital asset stockpile. This is a promise that you made throughout the campaign, and today we're keeping that promise. The reserve will be capitalized with Bitcoin that the federal government already owns, so it won't cost taxpayers a dime. This is like a digital Fort Knox for digital gold. And premature sales of Bitcoin over the past years cost American taxpayers over $17 billion in lost value, because we didn't have a long-term strategy.
Right.
Now we do. So.
And this is something you believe in fully?
100%, yeah.
Okay.
And the whole community believes in it.
Very good. And I made the promise, right?
Absolutely.
He doesn't want to sign that.
He really has to struggle to write his name in this one. You can tell there's just all these kind of wiggles.
He's like, what, you believe in this? Do you really?
Okay.
Okay, fuck.
So today we're signing.
All right, so there it is, the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. Ben Ark, what do you think? First thoughts? It's here. Promises made. Promises kept.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he was reluctant there, wasn't he, towards the end? He's like, well, do you think this is a good idea if I sign this thing? And he's signing it.
Well, this is part of a series of executive orders where Trump has signed them and he doesn't know what he's signing. And
yeah.
if that ever happened even once under the Biden administration, people would have lost their freaking minds. They were like, the president just signs things. But they've been televising it since the beginning. So it's normalized now that you tell the president, this is an order for us to leave the World Health Organization. It might cause chaos for medicine, but we'll save $200,000. He's like, that's nice. This is an order to establish.
He's gotten too used to signing the executive orders.
Yesterday,
I like the way they use the word.
But yesterday he banned a law firm. He signed a very specific order.
I know.
Kvue is no longer allowed to do business before the federal court.
I saw that one, and I thought it's not good when you start attacking the legal apparatus of your country, particularly if it's just a law firm which was acting within the law to try and bring a case up against you. Let's not get too political, though, Thomas. I know you don't like the bloke.
For a little while. Well, we kind of have to, but first let's break down the reserve here, Ben. Number one, what is it not? It is not buying tons of Bitcoin. Everyone thought that this strategic crypto reserve would lead to lots of Bitcoin buying, which would then support the market. Initially, even just as early as 3 or 4 days ago, when Trump announced this with his tweets, he announced that they would buy Cardano, Solana, Ripple, might have been some others. I don't think Trump coin was in there. And then he tweeted later, of course, Bitcoin and Ethereum would be included. But
seems pretty calculated, didn't it?
Those other coins went up 30%, Bitcoin, Ethereum 5 to 10%, all of them losing it a few days later with the uncertainty over the tariff announcements. And now this is the supposedly a thing to just keep the seized Bitcoin. Now, a reminder for everyone on the seized Bitcoin. If Ben's reticent, I'll go first. I'm ready on this one.
Go for it, man. I mean, I would like to, before you start, I would like to say, when I started working with you on this show, however many years ago it was, could you imagine us having this conversation? Really? It is incredible the journey we've made where, we were talking about some exchange in some random part of the world which was hacked and lost a few coins, and that was like the news cycle for Bitcoin for the next couple of weeks or month of that period. And now look at what we're talking about. It's really quite incredible.
Well, I remember when the story of the day was like some sandwich shop in Hungary accepts Bitcoin. And we'd be like, sandwich shop, you got to go here. Is anybody near here? And no one ever was. But, 5 people would shop there and that'd be it. But on this one, first of all, it's this bizarre idea, again, that they're going to keep the Bitcoin that's been seized. So a crime has been committed. Bitcoin has been seized by the government. And now, allegedly, because of this order, they're going to redirect those funds. Now, previously, historically, what they would do is if this was taken from someone, like if someone robbed a bunch of jewelry, they would take back the jewelry and they would, sell it and give the proceeds back to the victims. They'd be like, oh, here's for all the victims, victims restoration fund, or they would try to resell it, those kind of things. It wouldn't be collected like the drug dealers' boats or the drug dealers' Monets, the drug dealers' watches, any of these things. One could say, we need a strategic art reserve. The United States has stolen a bunch of art since 1960, and we could have just held that art. The same thing for land, although the United States does own a lot of land, so that is an interesting one. But it just seems very bizarre and kind of cherry-picked to do this one. It's been covered incredibly negatively in the press. Just to remind you guys of the outside world, I know we like to stay in the crypto bubble. The outside world, the same world that hated the Ross Ulbricht being freed, they also hated this, even though it's not even what you want. They see right through and they say, oh, this is a way to provide exit liquidity. They think that World Liberty and other Trump affiliated organizations have been buying lots of these coins, stocking up. Oh, my microphone broke again. This is a bad day for a microphone. And they can see all through that. And there's hundreds of articles. I could hardly find any other articles for these shows except articles about this Bitcoin reserve that isn't. And as far as the things I'm grateful for, I'm grateful that it doesn't have any other cryptos in it for now. Although they're having their crypto summit, I don't know if they're going to change their mind on that. Ben Ark, what do you think? I've talked a lot about the crypto reserve. See what you think and check out the chat as well.
Yeah, so they're talking about using the Bitcoin which they own, which, like you say, is Bitcoin which has been seized, the Bitfinex hack and whatever else. And these are other people's Bitcoins, which at some point should be returned to them, as opposed to just having it, for your Bitcoin reserve. He did seem hesitant, like he was fulfilling a promise he'd made, which he didn't really want to fulfill. There was part of me,
and if they
in that
a real Bitcoin reserve, they need to go through Congress. What you're saying here, Ben, is if you have to put something in to have a Bitcoin reserve of value, and even though you're the government and you control money printing, in reality, you still have to pass bills to get money printing.
Well, there was
so they're trying to sidestep this by keeping stolen property. It's like stuff from the lost and found bin we'll be keeping from now on. It's not.
The part of it which I did like was his hesitance to sign the bill, because Bitcoin ultimately is there to attack USD hegemony, and that will be an overall good thing. And I think, although he knows he's got to fulfill that promise, because he made that promise to a lot of people, they're doing it in the sort of least satisfactory way possible, which is just by keeping other Bitcoiners Bitcoin and not actually building a Bitcoin strategic reserve. You can tell by the way it's impacted the price, which it hasn't really impacted the price, that the market understands the reality of what this Bitcoin reserve actually is. And in a way, it's like kind of the worst possible scenario for the price, but anything with Bitcoin, when you get that Trojan behind enemy lines, it is a good thing. Like, I understand that they're stealing somebody else's coins, but the very fact that they now have publicly acknowledged that they have a Bitcoin reserve means that other countries may follow suit. Other countries might start thinking about accumulating Bitcoin. And then maybe they'll think of other ways in which they can pump their Bitcoin. With the coins which they have, they'll see the price of it go up. and then they'll be like, well, how else can we accumulate some Bitcoin? And there's this slim possibility that maybe they start accepting, I don't know, tax payments in Bitcoin, and they might start to try and build their stack that way because they can't just directly go out into the market and start buying Bitcoin. Yeah, but I think ultimately it's a theft. It's a very public theft. And the way in which the market has reacted to it is it understands the market seems to be saying that it doesn't think this is going to be the thing which is going to pump Bitcoin. I was quite amazed that the price didn't go up off the back of it. And as you know, in the last show I did predict that the price was going to go lower, that people would realize that Trump doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to Bitcoin. The market's pretty wise. But I mean, Bitcoin has a huge market cap now. So to actually move the price should take a lot. And I think that partly the pump which we've had has been based off the back of the FOMO and the news cycle of just a president being in power who made that promise that they would build this Bitcoin strategic reserve. And then we've got kind of like probably the worst possible version of it. But the silver lining is that he was reluctantly signing that executive order. He didn't like signing it. It hurt him. And if he had a choice, he wouldn't be signing. He'd be like, no, I'm not going to sign it, but I've made the promise, so I have to sign it. And that's what fills me with a little bit of hope that he's aware of how powerful Bitcoin is when it comes to flattening the power dynamic of reserve currencies across the world. Bitcoin is a apolitical reserve currency. Is Bitcoin's ultimate power like an apolitical way of countries being able to send value to one another? Because if you have a country with their currency as the world reserve currency, that's very dangerous, as we've seen with the US and the Brits when they had the British pound as the world reserve currency. They get up to all sorts of shenanigans. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time for Bitcoin. As I said, we've come a long way, Thomas. I missed that sandwich shop in Hungary.
Oh, it's so hard to say that there's any hope there because so much of this breaks the whole idea of the American system. The president isn't supposed to be just transactional, where you pay him and you get what you ordered out of him. He's supposed to do what's right for the country. That's supposed to be part of the calculus, but we don't see that here. We also see.
I mean, I hate to say it, Thomas, but your country's very different now. So the rules have changed, my boy. You're now living under King Donald. It's a dictatorship. You have to get used to it.
Well, they paid and they got their reserve though. But it's similar to everything else. They get this cursed reserve. It's that monkey paws wish where, yes, you get the powers you want, but it comes with crippling, horrible deficiencies. Just like this, there's no path to expand the reserve. There's no plans for a congressional reserve. And I suppose it's just going to be a talking point where they quote again and again. They're like, oh, we made this much on the reserve, but we could have made this much on the Rolex watch reserve or the Monet painting reserve. But yes, Ben, outside of this show, people are crowing and celebrating. Trump has delivered on his promise. The crypto people are 2 for 2. They got Ross Ulbricht freed. They got a Bitcoin reserve, and they got a special meeting in the White House.
Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when we get whatever new billionaire pops along into the Bitcoin ecosystem and everyone lauds them as some new great thought leader and praise be the new billionaire who should tell us what Bitcoin is. Like when they come along, usually in this show, we're reluctant to give them praise. And then give it 6 months, give it a year. They stab us in the back, they screw us, and they weren't Bitcoiners. And then we're like, well, we did say, and it's not much of a surprise. Oh, look, you can't trust the billion. Oh, look, you can't trust the neoliberal or the monopolist who controls everything. Oh, look, you can't trust this. Yeah.
It's all about priorities and time scale. Remember that the internet was built, our current internet was built by the worst people for the shortest amount of money for the most advertising. Facebook and other people built us this internet as quickly as possible so that it could serve their advertising needs. If we look at this in the same way, we haven't built long-lasting Bitcoin coalitions, people who understand Bitcoin, people who understand the reasons why these things make sense. Instead, we've snuck to the front of the line and bribed our way up there. We bribed off everyone else in the line, and now we're there. Just as the Ross Ulbricht thing didn't end the drug war, this doesn't end the Bitcoin war.
Yeah,
Ross,
absolutely.
I saw with a senator, with a representative, Thomas Massey, recently, and it was really strange because Ross wasn't there as like a hero of this experiment, this libertarian experiment that tested the drug war, you know, all those kind of things. I don't know why he was there, but yeah, go ahead, Ben. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I mean, what we should be fearful of is there's a few attacks you could do to Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin's never going to die, never going to get rid of the thing, but you could significantly impact its progress and all the good work we've done so far. One of those is a fungibility attack. So if Trump now starts to realize that Bitcoin is in fact an attack on the USD and USD hegemony, and then he initiates a fungibility attack, which is that he says within US markets, and you can use Bitcoin, it's fine, but you can only use clean coins. Now, that creates a fungibility attack in that you have different prices for different coins. Suddenly you have a whole bunch of Bitcoins which are trading on the market for X amount, and then you have a whole bunch of Bitcoins with shadier histories or obfuscated histories through coin mixes, which trade for less of an amount. That has always been Bitcoin's Achilles heel until we get privacy on the base chain, is the fungibility attack, because it just simply breaks it as money. You need fungibility in money. And that's my biggest worry, is that now that these politicians and presidents are engaging with Bitcoin, that they'll figure out the ways in which you can attack it in a sophisticated way where you can actually do some damage to the great work which we've been trying to do on promoting Bitcoin and people using Bitcoin. And one would be a fungibility attack. Another would be maybe mining centralization, which they could also do in the US as well by pulling in a lot of mining.
Even if you take the Bitcoin reserve idea out to its logical conclusion, it's also an attack on Bitcoin. The idea that I've heard proposed is the United States government could save Bitcoin or buy Bitcoin, stack it, and hold it until it's equal to national debt. Then they could sell Bitcoin, crash the entire Bitcoin market, quote, pay off the national debt. I don't know how they could pay off how they could sell enough fast enough before the market crashed to pay off the national debt. But that's a wonderful idea, that they could rug pull the entire Bitcoin market, and that's a thing we should be rooting for. So it's really weird to take this out to any kind of logical thing, unless you're saying, oh, the United States should just hold their Bitcoin forever, like every other Bitcoin holder, and maybe borrow against it or something. I don't know.
But Thomas, so like when it comes to greater adoption, this moment was always going to come that governments were going to start engaging with Bitcoin. And then rather than just seizing it from people, actually holding it and accumulating and trying to accumulate it. How did we expect that was going to play out? I think maybe naively, we assumed that by the time it got to that point, that governments wouldn't be powerful enough to have too much of an impact, or maybe it's just something we never really thought about. Like, what would be the ideal way in which Bitcoin scaled to a point where governments start engaging with it? What would be the ideal way in which we would see Bitcoin grow into being used by governments and being held by governments?
Well, I think the most important failure of Bitcoin right now is the failure of the retail market. This isn't a retail adoption bump. This isn't like your neighbors getting into Bitcoin, even not sending around Bitcoin Lightning Network, having their own Trezor wallet, knowing what a signature is, kind of into Bitcoin, but even just I bought some Bitcoin on Coinbase. We're not seeing that. So this isn't a retail adoption. We're not seeing commercials. We're not seeing door-to-door sales or any kind of adoption things from these big companies. This is not a retail adoption. Like you said, Ben, this is a government top-down adoption. So that's part of the problem here, and part of why we didn't expect it is that we expected that the government would come along because the people were using Bitcoin and the government had to get involved. Yeah. Now the government's getting involved before people are using Bitcoin. So we don't know if people are going to use Bitcoin.
So you feel like, so we all assumed that this would be much more of a bottom-up revolution, to the point that the government would suddenly turn around and think, oh crap, everyone's using Bitcoin, what do I do?
And in some ways, in incredibly successful ways, like we talked about on the year-end special show, these guys are Bitcoiners of the years, they're great heroes. they've skipped the line, right? They've used money and power and connections to get Bitcoin issues to the front of the line so that this guy put aside everything else about him, Russian asset. He's going to respect the Bitcoin views, right? Because he got the money and he got the votes. So he's very happy. It was a good deal, right? But as far as like a cultural change, the general public doesn't know about Bitcoin. They still think Bitcoin's confusing. Bitcoin either makes you lots of money or loses you lots of money, which both can also be true. But
I think that the way in which it was held back, but as a medium of exchange, I know we're going to cover this in a later story, so I don't want to go into it too much. But when we look at the El Salvador experiment when it came to payments and accepting Bitcoin, I mean, clearly the volatility of Bitcoin is the thing which holds it back as medium of exchange and as money, because one of the most important, probably the most important properties of functional money is stability, and then second to that is probably fungibility. Stability is probably the most important part of functional money, and that the money in your pocket is going to be worth the same next week when you try and spend it on some goods and services. It may go up or it will go up over 5-10 years, whatever, but just stability. And I think there is, within Bitcoin, there is a movement now of people who are starting to understand that. So we're seeing Lightning Labs. They're talking much more about stable assets on things like the Lightning Network, and I know Tether have got USDT on the Lightning Network, and Liquid have done some stuff with USDT as well. And I would like to see a recipe for smaller countries to be able to create their own stable coins and have them run on the Bitcoin stack. So you've still got sats in your pocket, you still have Bitcoin, but it's just stable, like it's just pegged to a bunch of assets or a bunch of fiat or something in order to keep it stable. And I'm starting to see more technological solutions being explored for that, because people are realizing that is the thing holding Bitcoin back as medium of exchange and as money, which you would need for that bottom-up revolution and that social awakening. Because I think that without that, people do just see it as a speculative asset, this high-risk speculative asset, which arguably it is, unless you hold it for long enough, and then it goes up to the point where you just stop thinking about it in that way and you're just happy.
Now, the previous idea to achieve stability was through price discovery, right? That everyone in the world would hear about Bitcoin, know about it, decide whether they want to buy it. Then the price evens out eventually because everyone's made the decision. What's going wrong with price discovery, Ben? Is it these large groups that have purchased it? Is it these large groups of people who refuse to purchase it, who won't take part in the price discovery? You think we need to get there faster by stable coins? Because I thought we could wait and just have Bitcoin.
Well, I mean, I would say that it's these stable coins, these stable synthetic assets or whatever, they would be built on Bitcoin. Because I think it's a chicken and egg problem. The way in which you achieve stability is through lots of people having Bitcoin in their pockets, and lots of people using it for merchant services and using it for payments. People aren't going to use it for merchant services and payments unless there's stability. So you don't get stability unless you're using it for money, and you can't use it for money unless it has stability. So in that regard, in order to get to the market volume and the market size we need to have, where this Bitcoin becomes this Goliath ship, which it can't have the price of Bitcoin manipulated too easily by big buys and some bad news, then we need it to be used as money. So I feel like it's an inevitable temporary sort of not hack, but something we're going to have to use, like these sort of synthetic assets or something which creates a stable peg with your sats, with your Bitcoin, while you're using it as money. That will need to exist. So then people use it as money. So we have all these inputs and all these points in which Bitcoin touches the real world, and then we end up with the volume and then the distribution that Bitcoin can then become stable. I mean, that's an idea and a point of view I've held for a good few years now, and I think it's true. And I think you're right in to say that if you've just got the Michael Saylor buying up gazillions of Bitcoin, and then the US strategic Bitcoin reserve buying up a gazillion Bitcoin, it becomes an attack vector in that they could just ultimately, the US could turn around and then start trying to rug pull the Bitcoin price by just dumping the market, because it's still amazingly, Bitcoin is still too small.
Well, and that does seem to be what's happening right now. More and more of these large players get involved and then essentially capture the Bitcoin market. And the ones being bought and sold are their Bitcoins. And they move when they want them to move. And then we see this kind of controlled shape that we do similar to the stock market and silver and other markets. So it is interesting to see that happen.
I mean, particularly when the people holding those wallets are in cahoots, you know, they're you got your Trump and your Michael Saylor, they're in their little WhatsApp group, and they're like, "Hey, it's now the time."
Especially recently, in the last week or so, we've seen tariffs were on, tariffs were off, tariffs were on, tariffs were off, and from the outside, it looks very confusing and unplanned. But if you were on the inside and you knew just a few minutes before that those tariffs were on or off, you could make a lot of money.
Well, that's the same as that Trump tweet, isn't it? It's like, it would be too obvious if I go and buy some of these shit coins, but I'm just saying, go buy helium or whatever it is. And then he tweets out, oh yeah, we're going to build a strategic helium reserve. And then helium's price goes whoosh. And then an hour later, he's like, right, okay, have you sold? Good. Okay. Right. Yeah, of course, it's going to include Bitcoin and Ethereum. So it's the ultimate tool for someone who wants to make a quick buck and manipulate markets, which is, I think, why it's very attractive to someone like Elon Musk with all his Doge pumping. And
well, it's been an incredible string since Trump coin, Melania coin, Eric coin, Donald Jr. coin. I think we're up to at least 4 of those. But going back to the topic on the strategic reserve, even though it is a very small strategic reserve, it's the lost and found booth, the leftover criminal Bitcoin of strategic reserves, almost it's like a gambler's fallacy of reserves, Ben. Do you see that? Where like it's a small roll for the United States, and it's the kind of thing where they're going to say in 5 years, if it's a success, they'll be like, oh, we bought $5 million worth of Bitcoin. Now it's worth 100 million. If only you'd let us do that with the entire $5 trillion, we would have had 100 trillion. You know, this kind of like small roll fallacy.
Well, there is that. This is the other thing. So like as soon as somebody actively publicly engages with Bitcoin and the Bitcoin price, like if they've now got that on their balance sheet, and then if Trump keeps it on the balance sheet for 4 years, that will be something which he goes out on, or if he goes out, or that will be something which he campaigns on for, being made crowned Donald Trump, King Trump, will be that the Bitcoin price would have gone up, and then this amount of Bitcoin which they had is now worth X trillions of dollars.
Because it is an executive order, is just as good as the president. This is not a bill that's been passed through Congress and signed by the president and so on. Like Ben's saying, a new president comes in, they say, no more strategic reserve, it goes away. We sell these off, we trade them for Rolex watches, whatever we're going to do. And as far as the greater idea of the reserve, if this was the promised Bitcoin reserve, the 100 million, the 100 million Bitcoin, whatever it was going to be, a million Bitcoin reserve, they wanted to get a million of the 21 million. I still think that this might be enough to kick off a bank run. I still think that the United States, the people who print the dollar, the people who own the dollar, and if you run that government, you also own the dollar and run the dollar, even though the Federal Reserve is separate and all that. There's still ways. They have now taken out a bet against the dollar. They have said, we're not so sure about the dollar, and we're going to put some of these other dollar similar tokens into a pile just in case the dollar doesn't go well. And I think that every other country in the world now has to take their own bet out against the dollar. And I think it's a horrible thing to encourage. And it's incredibly dangerous unless you want the United States to fail.
I mean, I want the US dollar to fail, to be fair, because I don't think that any country should have their currency as a world reserve currency. And I do think that letting the Trojan in isn't a wise thing, which is why we saw Donald Trump being hesitant signing that executive order, because ultimately chroniclers in the future may look back to that video and be like, that is the moment in which the US dollar started its death spiral and its death rattle as the world reserve currency. But I know that I personally believe that they're looking at something like Tether, and they're just thinking that maybe if this digital currency, this stable coin, which already exists out there and everybody's using it, if we just assimilate Tether as USD digital currency, then we can survive this new opposition to the US dollar, which is Bitcoin. And I do think there's some wisdom in that. Like if I think that's probably a good play. Like I probably just like adopt Tether as digital USD because it's being used everywhere by a whole bunch of people, and you can keep your USD hegemony for that little bit longer. I wrote a tweet about this this week actually, the relationship between Bitcoin and USD. And I talked about John Nash's ideal money. So John Nash, when he wrote, so those of you who don't know in the audience, like John Nash was a mathematician. That film A Beautiful Mind was based on him. He came up with a lot of game theory when it came to markets. And then also he came up with this idea of ideal money later on in life and wrote a lot about it. And ideal money is, it's the pursuit of better money by lots of different monies competing in a market. So you have lots of different fiat currencies competing in a market, but then by the existence of something like Bitcoin competing in the market, and then Bitcoin also competing against those fiat currencies, you work towards ideal money. So ultimately, within Bitcoin, we probably need some stability to use it as money. So we start to try and incorporate some of those ideas into Bitcoin. And then some of those fiat currencies, they need the lack of traction which Bitcoin has on the internet, so they start to try and create digital currencies. But then, ultimately, as you follow that sort of dialectic of currencies competing against each other, the one which wins out is Bitcoin, because it has certain properties, decentralization, the fact that nobody controls it. Those properties aren't achievable by a fiat currency, so Bitcoin will eventually win out as what would be ideal money, and the competition itself will encourage both to become better. So Bitcoin will offer stable solutions, and then the fiat currencies, the USDs or whatever else, they'll offer kind of digitally native versions of themselves, so people have less traction moving money around on the internet. And I think that's probably what will happen. There'll be this competition, which is now starting to play out, which we'll see, where fiat currencies will have to compete with Bitcoin. And then eventually Bitcoin will win. It's probably a good thing ultimately because people get access to better money. But as soon as we can move towards an apolitical world reserve currency, the world will be a much better, safer place. Sorry, Thomas.
It might happen, but I don't see them adopting Tether. I see them making their own copy of Tether.
No, because they'll fuck it up. And they know they'll fuck it up. Like, because so many people,
copy of Tether and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
So many people launch a thing, going to launch a new crypto, going to launch a new thing, and then it breaks. The good thing about Tether is it works, and it's been working for years, and there's already trillions of dollars worth of Tether out there, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of, but probably $1 trillion worth of Tether. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know what the statistic is.
Yeah, but
a lot of people use Tether.
As the government value, right? I don't value that it works, and I definitely don't value that there's trillions of it out there already. I want something I can control. I want something I can say this many,
Well, they can control it. So like the Tether is based against the USD when it comes to its stable peg. So part of the agreement between maybe Tether, the company, and the US government, if it were to adopt Tether as the digital USD, would be that would be that they would take control of Tether, the Tether which is out there, but then they would kind of try and keep that stable peg in some mechanism. But it's out there. People use it, and like Tether's used.
They have to make a deal with the Fed, and they have to say, well, there's a printing limit on how many dollars you can print, because otherwise the Fed could drown Tether in dollars, right?
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, so I was speaking to a Bitcoin core dev about this, and he was saying, because he's worked quite actively trying to encourage Bitcoin adoption in some of the poorer countries in, say, Africa, for example. And he was saying that it's an uphill struggle because everyone who would use digital currencies, they just use Tether because it's stable, and subsistence wage people just need stability. So I feel like, I mean, everyone always we always kind of assumed Tether would implode in on itself, and it never did. And I now feel that, like, for the US, it's probably the last hope to keep the USD as world reserve currency. So we'll see. That's my prediction.
We are still in a golden age of cryptocurrencies, Ben, where you can link up your Bitcoin account to your bank account. You can buy and sell. All of this will be gone when the government realizes and bans Bitcoin. Going back to the original ideas with the Trojan horse, remember, it was bad for the people of Troy. They brought the horse inside their wall. It was filled with Greeks. And when you let the Greeks out on the city, see, Ben's out there and the libertarians are out there like, they're going to get rid of the walls. The Greeks will get rid of the walls for us. Troy will be fantastic. It'll just be like Troy without the walls. But along the way, they just tear through all the peasants and all the businesses and all the animals and the horses and everything that you have. They just burn it all down. And it's very chaotic and very destructive. Whereas if we were really smart people, like Gene Hackman last week, and we thought of what a smarter person than us could do, we could say, can we create a situation where there's a soft landing for that Trojan horse, where we all know it's coming, but we all prepare for it, and we glide and we casually switch over, right? And we don't just, throw one of them out and bring the other one in or anything like that. We casually switch over. And that's what we wish we could do as smarter people. Instead, we're probably just going to wait until time runs out and there's no choice anymore. And then we'll make our switch, and then we'll say that we always meant to switch the whole time. We still have an exit question before we go on to more talk about reserves. Ben Ark, do you think that a Bitcoin reserve sounds strange? Countries have already been stockpiling helium, maple syrup, and cheese. What is the silliest reserve, Ben Ark? Helium, maple syrup, or cheese? Of course, I think Canada is stockpiling maple syrup. They make a lot of it. A lot of countries probably stockpile cheese. It's a major output.
Helium is also, it's a scarce asset, so there's not that much helium out there. So you should all stop using helium balloons because it's actually a fossil fuel. There's not, isn't an infinite supply
and the
of helium.
Mylar balloons land on power lines, cause power outages. Even here in Las Vegas, a major power outage recently.
It's a fun article title, but I think all of those three things are very justifiable reserve assets which a country should stock. Maple syrup, it doesn't appreciate in quality like it. You can keep it for years. It's sugar. It's basically honey, so you can keep it thousands of years. Cheese gets better with time. Helium is a scarce resource on this planet, so it's only ever going to go up in value. Probably cheese, I would say. Probably no. I like all of them. If I was a country, I would have all three of them.
I think they're fine too. I just think it's all about distribution back to the people. If the cheese is starting to go bad, they need to give it back to the people. If the syrup has been there too long, free syrup for everybody in Canada. Yeah. And as for the helium, I agree, Ben. It's an incredibly scarce resource. We need to stockpile it. It's an interesting idea.
I would say on the USD dollar thing, I would say that don't be scared, Thomas. You're like me. If this were the Victorian times and you were challenging or you were talking about the British pound losing its world reserve currency status, I would be saying the same things. But it's okay. Like, it's a good thing for your currency not to have the world reserve currency status.
You know that the clocks will start running and we'll stop running and we won't have tea at 4:00. You know that it won't be the same afterwards. Britain's got to remain the empire. We've got to keep the empire. Bring in India, Britain. But we're about to move on to issue 2, which is pretty much the same issue. Issue 2, Texas Senate passes bill creating Bitcoin reserve in order to move towards a digital future. The bill doesn't say exactly how much will be invested in the reserve, but it does say there'll be a special investment fund outside of the state treasury, and that it'll allow them to diversify their investment approach because Texas is having trouble just putting their money in a savings account. Ben Ark, what do you think about Texas, the state, and their Bitcoin reserve?
This is perhaps a silver lining. It will destroy the USD hegemony. Sorry, Thomas. B, other countries will just FOMO, and whilst other states in America will FOMO, they'll be like, well, I need a Bitcoin strategic reserve, but we already have some Bitcoin. So now Maybe if we just call these stolen coins a strategic reserve, then we don't have to give them back to people. But they'll FOMO, and I can imagine this happening. I can imagine other countries following suit and saying, well, I can imagine Starmer turning around tomorrow in Parliament and saying, perhaps we should have a Bitcoin strategic reserve. And then, I mean, maybe it's a bit of hopium, but maybe in a month or so, Starmer will also say, do you know what? You can pay your tax bill in Bitcoin. We're going to start accumulating some of this Bitcoin stuff. It's a good idea. I watched some early Mad Bitcoins videos. I'm sold. Everybody accumulate Bitcoin. So yeah, I mean, maybe this is the beginning of a domino effect across the world of people making Bitcoin reserves initially for their stolen coins, of course, but then over time they'll be like, well, we need to accumulate more of this stuff because it's going up in value. Let's allow people to pay their tax bills in Bitcoin.
Now, I know in the classic book Snow Crash, he talked about governments and corporations being the same thing. And I often say the wrong word, country or corporation, when I try to say it. But we all don't have to just give that up at once, right? We can still separate in our mind and say the government is a thing where we invest together to improve society. A corporation is a thing where we invest together to get the best return, right? Dollar return versus good of society return. Texas should be investing for the good of the society of their people. They should be trying to raise them up. Which program it is, that's a different issue. But they shouldn't be investors for the people. The guy in the article mentions, inflation's so high. If you put your money in a savings account, you're barely beating inflation. But unfortunately, as much as I'm a Bitcoin advocate here, also down 30% like the rest of the market, inflation at the savings account doesn't do that to you, man. You're out there, there are goldfish in our pond. We can deal with the alligators and the crocodiles and the sharks. You can't. It's not, and not what the government should be doing. It's not your job. If the Bitcoin reserve goes well, the people of Texas have more money. So they could then sell that money and use it on services for their people, parks, better roads, shade, whatever it is, something like that, making their own coin.
Shade. It's sunny there, isn't it? I mean, this is Yeehaw, Texas, I suppose. So in that environment, there is no society. There's just individuals, I guess, to quote Thatcher. That's kind of
how can they stand? And that's what's all crazy about this is it's always these individuals all of a sudden who want the government to hold this investment vehicle for you. Maybe because it pumps their own bags. I started to read an article. The guy was like, this is all, 3-card Monty, and the Bitcoiners have gotten their great trick and they're going to trick everyone so they can all exit. And now for some of the altcoins, that might be true. But for Bitcoin, it's just so much larger a thing to imagine it all exiting on the US government or on the Texas government or whatever it may be. But still, going back life for the Texas people.
Going back to one of your original points there, maybe if we do get that domino effect and all these strategic reserves start to accumulate Bitcoin, then that might create a bit of price stability. I mean, unless there's a domino effect in the other direction when the US dumps the Bitcoin, everyone else starts dumping the Bitcoin. Putin's like, yeah, I'm going to dump my Bitcoin glue, and everyone's just dumping Bitcoin.
Well, and that's the classic thing. The states still haven't seen that meme where it's like Neo and Morpheus, and Morpheus, when you won't have to sell your Bitcoin. And that means
you have to buy the bar car in Bitcoin. Yeah,
Bitcoin replaces the dollar. And if you're Texas and if you're America and you print the dollar, that's bad for you. If you just work to become a part of the government in Texas or the government of the United States, you're weakening your position. You're giving yourself less power, right? If you want to influence things, print more dollars. And that's why this Bitcoin reserve idea took off in the first place, is they said, well, we could just print a bunch of dollars, buy a bunch of Bitcoin. And I've postulated from the very beginning of Bitcoin, you could go back and check, every time they do that, they print more dollars, they get less Bitcoin. I think it's probably happened to you as well. You go to work to print your dollars, but every time you buy, you get less Bitcoin. Maybe not now, but usually.
I mean, I would say if you're a US citizen and then you love your country, I would say that you should hate Bitcoin, because your Bitcoin is there to rug pull your power base. No, I'm joking. It's
No, we get an incredible amount of power from being the world's reserve currency. People that are protected by that umbrella, even if they want to criticize the umbrella, have to admit that it's doing a good job of keeping rain off of us.
I mean, this is something, interesting. So this is something which has been very topical over the Ukraine, the Zelensky-Trump fiasco, is that Europe has now realized that, since the Second World War, Europe has depended upon the US as its big brother who will come in and step in and look after it when things go awry, and we haven't got the security and the armies to defend like an attack. So the general feeling in Europe is that for suddenly we've been made aware that puts us in a very fragile position if suddenly the US turns around and becomes indifferent to Europe and like the UK, for example. We've lost that big brother, that big protector, that umbrella. So yes, that it's really interesting because the whole Trump scenario has made me very aware of the efforts which were made post World War II to design a world which would have more peace, and that a lot of those things which were a lot of the mechanisms which were designed into that system to sustain peace are now being actively attacked. And they were all mechanisms which previously I would advocate the attacking of. I would say, let's get rid of the US's power over the world. But then now we're starting to see that starting to happen. I'm like, well, Europe was able to drag itself into 2 world wars in quite close succession. And it seems we had a relatively long sustained period of peace since the Second World War and post, that new design, which was created for world peace. So it does worry me, the idea of European countries building up their arms forces without having this protector who could theoretically step in and look after us. So it makes me have to kind of question my own assumptions when it came to some of the power bases on the world stage. But ultimately,
I also think
countries which share a reserve currency, so countries which share a currency don't go to war with each other. Historically, it's never really happened. If you share a currency, they don't go to war with each other. So ultimately, through all this madness, if Bitcoin does manage to rise as the world reserve currency, as the apolitical world reserve currency, then that will be a good thing for peace. But yeah, it's interesting times.
Yeah, but Ben, they also used to say that countries that have a McDonald's never fought, but it turns out they just move out the McDonald's and have the war like a month later. But going back to the other idea, I think what we're seeing here is the transition between the analog world of analog agreements, handshake agreements, other kind of basic agreements, to more powerful digital agreements. Right now, the United States is still technically in NATO, but does anyone really believe, I want to say Article 4 or maybe 5, where the countries would come to the defense of other NATO members? Does anyone right now really believe that Trump, who doesn't want to spend money on a war and believes that the Europeans haven't spent enough money on their own defense, if, for example, country A was to roll into Poland, the United States would not come to Poland's defense instantly? Whereas if we had a digital system similar to what we're talking about with Bitcoin, where perhaps the United States had to put up $100 trillion in currency, and that day, if there's an article in the newspaper that says Poland has been attacked, and if the next day there's not an article in the newspaper that says the United States has entered the war on the side of Poland, then the United States digitally loses that $1 trillion. That would be an example, I think, of a digital agreement. Don't you think, Ben, that these old agreements are analog? And the same thing with the United States government. Everything that Trump has broken through, they've all been traditions. They've all, like, for example, when Mitch McConnell stole a Supreme Court seat from Barack Obama, he stole it with tradition. He said, well, we're not going to let you appoint one. And then Obama said, what? No one's ever done this. And Obama didn't pocket appoint it during the Senate recess. You can appoint whoever you want. No one's ever appointed a Supreme Court justice that way. FDR threatened but no one has. But again, all of these things are kind of gentlemen's agreements. They're handshakes, right? They're analog. They're not digital. They don't execute automatically, whether you do it or not. Don't you think, Ben, that we need, maybe if we rebuild this system, we'll rebuild it more like that?
I mean, there is a lag in that you have these traditional systems which were built in a very analog era, which are now being challenged by the digital space. And it's funny, it's a shame that Josh isn't here, because what it sounds like you're talking about is speculation markets. Not speculation markets, what are they called? Bugger. When you place a bet on something and then you lose the bet.
It's like a prediction market.
Prediction markets, yeah, prediction markets.
It's a stake. Like we'd all have to stake up. Each country would put $1 trillion in. It would be the $1 trillion agreement. And if it didn't go through, that other country would get the money that could be presumably used for their defense, but maybe they couldn't spend it fast enough if it was coming in. But again, with these governments, they were designed to be slow on purpose. They were designed to be deliberative and to come to a compromise, right? It just happened that one side recently decided not to compromise, then built a media network that fulfilled this, populace that they needed, and then squeaked out victories where now they don't have to compromise.
But then
it was never designed for no compromise.
Well, I mean, but what you're saying is you're talking about forms of democracy which were evolved out of very analog eras where we didn't have the digital space which we now have, like representative democracy, for example, in that you elect somebody who has similar ideals to you for a fixed period of term, and then that's kind of it. Like, they do their thing without trying to piss off the voters too much. They just try and get on and do the thing. Whereas the reality is that nowadays we should have much more direct forms of democracy, and we should be able to vote on decisions and all those executive orders which Trump is signing. There's nothing stopping the US population being able to vote on the day on how they feel about those different executive orders before they actually go through. So yes, it's scary because we're at a period, I think, an inflection point where society is going to have to change. But I think ultimately, humanity leans towards greater liberty for people. We take a few steps forward, a few steps back, but ultimately the path is greater liberty for people, and people get happier and wealthier. So hopefully that will happen. And we won't have World War III, but we'll see. We're a month in.
Well, I like your first idea much better, Ben, where the people are working on I'm working on what percentage it needs to be so it doesn't become tyrannical by the masses. If it's 85%, they could overturn anything, or 99%, they could veto anything that Trump does, just the people themselves with an instant vote.
Well, I mean, this is the agora. This is democracy. When democracy was founded, it was founded upon the idea of the agora, where Greeks would go and they would every day discuss in Athens, the topics of the day, and everyone could have a voice. And this was democracy. This was direct democracy. This is direct forms of democracy, which society should have. But we couldn't have that before pre-internet. Now we can have that. So, we'll get there. But it's going to be. Hopefully, it won't be a bloody revolution to having systemic change. Hopefully, it'll be a peaceful transition. But historically, change usually does happen in quite, chaotic ways.
Well, I've been there to the Agora, and it's an open green field now in Greece. And remember, that was also landholders, and that was everyone in town coming to the assembly to vote. That wasn't representative democracy. With one of the things in the United States with representative democracy is that the people who are writing the government, the founding fathers, didn't trust the people. They did not trust the demos. They called that the mob. They wanted to create a republic. They did not allow for the direct election of senators by the people. The senators were chosen by the state legislators. There was a lot more layers and control. And I think if we had a direct democracy, we'd need those kind of layers to slow the system down so that extreme actions don't happen, extreme overreactions by the populace. But I'm afraid, Ben, that the more simple choice is a one-person rule. And I feel the more simple choice than trying to build a system that will properly take the concerns of all these people together, a giant computer system like the one on Star Trek that would run the society. I think it's easier to run a fake one and to say 90% supports the leader and that the one candidate is the best and has always been the best. And I think we might give that a try, which is horrifying given the level of technology and information that we have here. But it's also that one classic epic 2014 video clip animation YouTube you guys should go check out from the old days. It could be the greatest of all possible information environments, which the internet is if you want to put some work into it, or it can be the worst of all information environments. It can be gossip and garbage and cat videos. And I think in a lot of ways, as we've become more lazy and maybe we had no chance, maybe we were addicted to laziness and especially the little 5-second videos or whatever, the shorts and things, I think we've fallen into that. I don't know that we've risen to the challenge of the tool that we created.
No, I think we will. I'm a great believer in the overriding incentive for humanity is greater liberty for people, and no matter how many psychopaths you have, it doesn't outcompete the billions of people who live on this planet who just want more liberty. And the way in which we get more liberty is through more decision making by the people as a whole, through direct forms of democracy. So we'll get there. And I hope it's a smoother transition. It's not too bloody.
Well, like they said with the Hemingway quote at the end of the movie Seven, the world is a beautiful place and worth fighting for. I believe in the second part. Moving on to the exit question, Brazilian Meliuz fintech company adopts Bitcoin reserve strategy, shares soar. Yet another company has adopted the Bitcoin infinite jest addictive reserve strategy. Why bother making anything when you can hold Bitcoin and borrow money to buy more Bitcoin, allowing you to hold more Bitcoin that allows you to borrow money to hold more Bitcoin? Ben Ark, what do you think about the Michael Saylor infinite money glitch spreading to Brazil?
It's a very good point. I mean, it kind of ties nicely in with what we were just saying about the legacy systems we have in place and the legacy money we have in place now having to butt up against these new forms of money and these new potential systems we have in place. In a world where fiat currency exists and money lending exists, then you can just buy Bitcoin, borrow money against the Bitcoin which you hold, buy more Bitcoin, borrow money against the Bitcoin you hold, and you can create this infinite money printer, which Michael Saylor, geniusly managed to.
I feel insane saying it, and I feel like I would have been a run out of every bank in the world trying to borrow money to do it. But at the same time, I see that others have done it, Ben. So it's like a perpetual motion machine.
It's a perpetual motion machine, and ultimately, is it pointing towards the fact that our traditional financial system just can't exist now Bitcoin exists, because you can just create this infinite money machine. I mean, and the more MicroStrategy type businesses that are out there, the more apparent it will be that our traditional money system needs to change the way it works, because it can't exist. There's going to be these people who exploit it and take advantage of it, and they just sidestep into the infinite money machine.
And I think this goes back to the core and the beginning of the essential Bitcoin belief for me here. Again, I'm a liberal, right? You guys are all libertarians or conservatives or cypherpunks or whatever. I'm still cypherpunk liberal, but the idea that Bitcoin is inevitable. It doesn't matter if you like it or you don't like it, or if you think it's good for the environment or bad for the environment, or you made money off it or you lost money off it, or you think that all the smart people made money but not you, or whatever it is. Whatever your belief is religiously on Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. Like Ben's saying here, its arrival, its existence, the way that the network keeps working, it hasn't been broken technically. I think for a lot of people, there was a big seal there where they're like, Bitcoin will be hacked, it will be broken, people will ban it technically, China will ban it technically, they won't have it happening within their borders. Unbannable, unbreakable, right? Continues to survive. And the idea then goes back to what I said earlier, where we adapt to this Bitcoin. We create a soft landing. We create alternatives for charity programs and disaster reliefs. We create maybe even Bitcoin funds similar to the strategic reserve, but not if we print the dollar. Like if we print the dollar to buy more Bitcoin. We're caught in an infinite loop there of destroying our own asset. But otherwise, everyone else should be holding the Bitcoin, thinking about the future with the Bitcoin, adapting to the Bitcoin. If you don't, you're going to be left behind. But more likely than that soft landing idea, we're going to do the old crash into the wall thing, because that's what we as a people seem to do. And after we crash into the wall, there'll be pieces of everything everywhere, and we'll have to try to pick it up and see if we can fix it and what kind of things we can still fund. And I just can't guarantee things that way. And it comes back as well to another large book that I read recently, the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. And what Asimov talks about with these psychohistorians, psychology mixed with history, is that they've plotted out the future with kind of like a computer system, but like a big graph. And they're like, the future is going to do this. And they say, well, the empire is going to end. The bureaucratic center of the empire is too big. The empire is going to end. So there's two ways to go. We can have a soft landing for the empire, only 10,000 years of darkness, or we can have a hard landing for the empire, maybe 1 million years of darkness, right? A lot more people hurt. And I see that with Bitcoin, both from a government and a business and a finance and a technical way. We can work on the soft landing together, improve things for everyone, or we can let it crash and then try to pick up the pieces later. Ben, what do you think? Have you read Foundation?
No, but I mean, I think you're right. I think you've just got to accept the fact that this thing exists and the world has changed. And as I mentioned before, with John Nash's Ideal Money, it's competing with this fiat dichotomy we've had for however long. And yeah, the world has to change and adapt for Bitcoin, and ultimately it will be a good thing because it is an apolitical money which people can use across the world, and that will mean that there's less conflict in the world, and that'll be a good thing.
But just like everything else, there's going to be more conflict before there's less conflict. Remember, to get to the Star Trek,
it's a dangerous prediction.
in the Star Trek future, they have to go through this horrible eugenics war and nuclear war. It's implied, like Planet of the Apes, to get to the Star Trek future where everyone's equal.
That's the historical materialist outlook of history, is to analyze history and say, well, every time there's a revolution, it's usually bloody. And this is where Marx went wrong, in that he predicted that the shift from capitalist mode of production to socialist mode of production would be a bloody revolution, and then it almost empowers a bloody revolution, because then someone comes along and says, well, okay, well, let's make this bloody revolution happen. So there's definitely a danger in kind of that historical materialist overview of history.
Marx could have been a lot more clever if he had written the revolution as it would be good for the bourgeoisie. He writes the revolution up. He says the social classes are going to rise up, but this is actually going to be good for the bourgeoisie, and they're going to give you more power, and they're not going to put your heads on sticks. And if he'd just written it like an opposite thing, because you need to provide a soft landing for everyone, not just.
Well, I think where he fell short in the idea of a socialist revolution, which is what Bakunin pointed out to him, was that by advocating for the rebrocracy, by advocating for the people to overthrow the bourgeoisie, you'll be replacing these corrupt forms of power which you're trying to rightfully rally against. You're replacing them with something far worse, which is what happened and what we saw in the USSR. So yeah, you want in that context, you would want widespread formations of cooperatives outcompeting companies in a free market, as opposed to people taking to the streets and sending all the managers and the business owners into the fields and to the gulags. It's better if it's a soft revolution. So let's advocate for a soft revolution, and let's not imagine that just because historically revolutions tend to be bloody, let's not advocate for them. And let's just hope that the transition to a future which runs on the internet and actually embraces this digital revolution encourages direct forms of democracy, and then engages with digitally native currencies like Bitcoin in a way which doesn't disrupt humanity too much.
See, and it's all the same thing we were talking about earlier. We want the Bitcoin revolution from the ground up, where every citizen, every person has Bitcoin on their phone and they're all excited about Bitcoin. What we're getting instead is the Bitcoin revolution from the top down, where the czar says Bitcoin is super cool and that you should get into it. And that's never going to work, and it's not going to work in the same way. So it is kind of interesting. But I think we're well off topic here, Ben. We want to tell the people the true exit question, the answer to all things, so that people know where to invest next week. The Bitcoin predictor ball. Ben Ark, you must first predict against the ball. Will the price be higher or lower this time next week for Bitcoin? And while Ben's muted, you can tell us in the chat, what do you think? Higher or lower? Tell us in the chat. Give us a thumbs up down below. Ben, are you still with us? He's looking at the charts, I think.
Sorry.
It's too late.
I was making my prediction.
He's drawing one of the triangles.
No, yeah. So there's a 9 after an 8, and that became before the 3, which means that it's definitely going to be. I actually think it's probably going to be even or a little bit high. Last week, my prediction was absolutely spot on, and I made a point of tweeting. Oh no, sorry, it was the week before. It was absolutely spot on, and I made a point of tweeting it out and pointing out how spot on I was over the whole Trump embracing Bitcoin debacle. Yeah, can I share screen, Thomas?
It says if we can buy one of the Tone Vase C pods, we could avoid the revolution. You really want to live in one of those little pods on a pole out there in the ocean? You know how terrible. That's even worse.
Is Tone Vase, is that what he's up to these days, selling C pods?
According to the chat, I have no information.
Oh, I love him.
I always think that it's going to be higher, Ben. And I've been right recently. We did bounce. But generally, the Trump thing has been surprisingly horrible, despite the halvening run that crypto was on. And I'm not crazy about how it's been. No,
I'm sharing screen here now, Thomas, and I'm showing you the Magic 8 Ball here on the new LMBits extension, Magic 8 Ball, which I actually paid for. So the developer who made the Magic 8 Ball extension is that every time someone installs it, they're getting 500 sats per install. It's pretty impressive stuff. But if I go in here, I can make a new Magic 8 Ball here, and I'll call it. Oh, there's bloody things in the way. There we go. I always have this issue where I can't click on the top half of the screen. Maybe if I
write it to your Linux developer, I'm sure they'll fix it.
Yeah, just fucking doxing everything here right now. Okay, so if I call this TB, the Bitcoin group. There we go. And then
analog 8 Ball is ready to go right here.
I'm going to have wait there. I'm going to have the money go to Ben's money, amount to pay 10 satoshis. So we got yes, no, maybe, ask again later, better not tell you. Yeah, they all sound like 8 Ball responses. I'm going to create that now, and then I'm going to I can't click. There we go. Look at this, and then I have to go over here and I click on this thing, and there's an LN URL, pay. So if I pay that, wait there, 1 second, Thomas.
Standing by.
This prediction market we have right here. Okay, so I'm going to pay my 10 satoshis, and it's going to say it's paying, it's paying, it's paying. It's getting ascending. Oh, Thomas. Lightning.
Shout out to everybody in the chat. Santa Tajin, Inspiring Formula.
There we go.
Starship.
My reply is no.
All the crew.
My reply is no.
No, that means the price is not going to be higher next week. The ball is pessimistic. Just to compare, we'll have to compare with the analog ball for all the people that are old school. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? It is too dark for me to read.
You old.
It says, well, there's a lot of words here. It says, better not tell you now. Better not tell you
That's
now.
about accurate.
So, there it is. The ball has spoken. And we also had a digital 8 Ball this week. Check out World Crypto Network at worldcryptonetwork.com. We've got lots of shows like this going back 10 years, 11 years, 3 months, and 1 day. But we've got more show, more issues, bonus talk. El Salvador announces more Bitcoin purchases, but gives the IMF assurances that they won't. They're saying in many articles that the El Salvador Bitcoin experiment is over. They signed a deal with the IMF saying no more Chivo wallet, that they would allow their Bitcoin reserves to be audited and their control systems to be checked by the IMF. And at a point of conflict and controversy, El Salvador agreed to the IMF that they wouldn't buy any more Bitcoin. But the president says that they will. Ben Ark, what do you think? Is the El Salvador Bitcoin experiment over? And is the president really going to buy more? Or is he just posturing, having signed the deal with the IMF?
I actually was very depressed about the whole El Salvador experiment. And it made me sleep in. I spent a much of a day kind of in bed in worry over the El Salvador experiment, because I went to El Salvador. I went to El Salvador a bunch of times. I remember when it started, and we had the Lightning conference there, and I had a lot of high hopes. And my assumption for El Salvador accepting Bitcoin payments was that someone was going to swoop in, and that we would have some stable medium of exchange on Lightning and on Bitcoin. I thought it was going to be a Blockstream or Lightning Labs would swoop in and build this thing. And then they would have like an El Salvador dollar, for example, which, talking to El Salvadorians on the ground, I think would have been received very well. Ultimately, it's about 90% of that country is unbanked, and they don't have access to a digital banking economy. And then if they do get access to that digital banking economy, and if the sats in their pockets are called an El Salvador dollar and it's pegged to a basket of fiat assets, whatever, they would embrace that just for the cultural association. Maybe they, we culturally as Bitcoiners, we like Bitcoin, so we want to use it. Whereas for the average El Salvadorian, they don't. All they want is a stable medium of exchange. They want something which isn't going to have any traction. So I kind of assumed that was going to be built. And then nobody built it. And I lumped myself in with, the sorts of people who should have probably built this thing. So I'm not just accusing people of not putting in enough effort for trying to build this thing. There are loads of great projects who tried to go out there and try to help the Bitcoin adoption phase in Bitcoin in El Salvador. But yeah, it was a real missed opportunity, because I really feel that what happened in El Salvador, it should have been a blueprint. It should have shown the world that this country with the highest murder rate in the world, with one of the weakest economies in the world, can accept something like Bitcoin, accept it as a money and as a medium of exchange, and then bootstrap their economy so everybody suddenly has access to digital money. And I feel that we fell short of that task. We had that one job to do, and we failed them. And I do feel incredibly bad about that. And I don't feel that opportunity is going to happen again anytime soon. And it's just a real wasted opportunity. And now what we're having is Bitcoin for El Salvador is much more of a strategic reserve. They just have their Bitcoin holdings, and they're treating it more like gold. You don't have to accept Bitcoin as legal tender now in El Salvador. And that's a shame. That's a pity. And I wish we'd done more work on making it more accepted. And if someone had built the El Salvador dollar on something like standard sats or stable sats, whatever, then, and if people could have just had that in their wallets, in their Lightning wallets, then they would have used Bitcoin throughout the country, because they would have been proud of it. There would have been a sense of pride over them having this superior technology where they can send and receive payments. And we didn't do that, and it was a real shame. Over the IMF thing, I mean, there is also the way in which it was rolled out wasn't ideal. Chivo wallet was historically incredibly bad. 1/5 of every payment would fail, and the locals would call it the Chivo tax. So not fail, but you would send the payment, and then it in the wallet. It would acknowledge the payment, so the person who's receiving the funds wouldn't know that they've actually got the money. And yeah, I wish that I'd gone there for longer and I'd worked in El Salvador more, just building the stable medium of exchange on Lightning as sats, using something like standard sats, and made an El Salvador dollar. But now, so the IMF has said that they're not allowed to use Chivo wallet, which probably isn't a bad thing because it was a piece of shit. And they also need to have their Bitcoin reserves audited, which also probably isn't a bad thing because who knows how they're storing the Bitcoin. And that they can't accumulate more Bitcoin, which Bukele's clearly doing. So I don't know. I mean, like it's he's gone for this IMF loan. Maybe the IMF will just overlook the fact that he's accumulating more Bitcoin. I know that Bukele felt betrayed by the Bitcoin community for not supporting this Bitcoin bond idea with the ridiculous volcano city idea. Like, why wouldn't you want to invest in a city situated next door to a volcano? But I don't know if you remember, like when we had the crazy price pump and everyone was excited about El Salvador accepting Bitcoin. The thing which really, honestly, the thing which the market reacted to and made the price crash was the announcement of the Bitcoin bond, and that they were going to mine using volcanoes, and that they were going to build a new city, a Bitcoin city, because it's like the market reacted as, oh, okay, this guy's insane. If he turned around at the time,
and don't forget Samson Mao was there.
Oh, I mean,
around on stage like Elon Musk, and they were talking about how invincible Bitcoin was, and
it was all the pumpy, the pumpy CEO mentality. I think it did a disservice to the adoption of Bitcoin in El Salvador. But for anyone who went to El Salvador, it was like, great, you've got this, you're accepting Bitcoin, you're accumulating some Bitcoin, use the money you make to just improve somewhere like because San Salvador is a beautiful city, and it really doesn't take much, just like a couple of weeks on each street to bring it up to standard as sort of, where we'd be in a European or a US city or something. So there's not that much investment which needs to be made, but the idea of just creating this Bitcoin city, that's honestly when you saw the Bitcoin price back in that pump in whenever it was 2020, when you saw it drop, was when the world looked around and thought, okay, this guy's actually insane. But anyway, so it feels like a failed opportunity and a wasted opportunity where we should have, our job as developers and Bitcoiners was to give these unbanked people the best payment experience they could possibly have, help them with their remittances, getting money into the country from whatever country they're, in the US or wherever else. And then for people who had the Bitcoin in that country, just be able to send it and spend it in a way where it kept its stable peg and had some cultural association. Our job was to just create the best money experience using the Bitcoin technology stack. It was possible then, using the technology stack, to build what El Salvador needed, and it's more possible now to build what El Salvador needs. But we didn't do it, and it's a failure on our part. Like, because that really was partly. I know it was mandated from the president of El Salvador, but on a world stage, that really was kind of like a bottom-up revolution, in that it was one of the world's poorest and most violent countries accepting Bitcoin for payments. And I feel like we kind of we failed in that task. So I am sorry, El Salvador. We'll try harder next time.
There are so many startups that are mandated by the government turn out so well. And as far as the other thing with El Salvador, well, I agree, Ben. They shouldn't have been exposed to both the downside of the Bitcoin price and the upside of Bitcoin price. That's far too much for people in a developing country to deal with. They can't be expected to be hedging or savings or bringing their money in and out or having different streams of money. If you give them money, it needs to be relatively stable. The fact that you can send it around without anything else, that's not enough, right? That's not enough of a trick to make it useful for them, to make it safe for them. If they tried to use it, they probably lost money. They're probably mad at Bitcoin, and they're probably right. I've said this before and I'll say it again, although it doesn't help anything. We always do seem to try this Bitcoin thing with kind of a damaged country, with a damaged company, with a damaged area, stuff like that. We never try it somewhere that has computers, somewhere that's technological, somewhere that's maybe small, maybe somewhere like Japan. They have a lot of computers, they have a lot of devices, they have a technological population. Maybe we could try something like that there. Chivo wallet, it was bad. It had to be. It was a local product. The same thing, Ben, if they'd tried a stable-backed El Salvador coin using only El Salvador people, the real thing that you want, and you want it from the outside in hindsight, but from the inside, is you want these carpetbaggers to come in with a ready-to-go, on-the-book solution of El Salvador coin and just to stamp it on there. And that way it's built by the best engineers in the world, but you just pretend that it's local and maybe say that some guy built it, some guy, Italic Muterin, something like that. I
got to tell you, Thomas, so there was this incredible project called Standard Sets, which came about during the El Salvador event, and it was just overlooked by Bitcoiners. No one cared about it, and it was one of, honestly, the most impressive projects, which was synthetic assets. So it kept its stable peg through high frequency trading of sats on a lightning channel to an exchange, and then exchanging it for fiat currencies. And it kept its peg. It worked, and they got so little support. It pissed me off. Like, they didn't get any grants, no VCs invested in it, and I thought, this is the fucking solution right here. Like, ultimately, we'll have more sophisticated forms of localized stable coins on Bitcoin. But this idea of a synthetic asset where you can have a stable peg to a fiat currency, or a basket of fiat currencies, but even a basket of assets. So it could have been, El Salvador could have pegged it to the price of coffee, for example. Like, that existed. Like, developers, hardcore, cool as shit, Lightning and Bitcoin developers worked on this project, and they had no support. No one was interested in the project. No one understood the power of that project. Galloy did, the company Galloy, they made a very similar product off the back of it called Stable Sats, and got a bunch of investment for it. But when they did it, it was all about, the USD. We're going to make a USD stablecoin. That's fucking not what people want. Like, we saw it with the Bristol pound. Like, people love it when you have a localized stable coin. They have cultural association to it. They have cultural pride in it, and it makes them want to use it. Like, there's 8 billion people on this planet who have who have a smartphone. Like, it is possible for people to do digital payments. Like, all those people, that 90% of people who are unbanked in El Salvador, like 90% of them have a smartphone and they can use digital currencies. Like, it was such a missed opportunity. And I just think that, I don't know, people became like you say, the Samson Mouse. They went off on this rampage of this CEO Pumpy rampage of wanting to build cities and stuff, and then there was just a complete oversight over what the general populace, like, no one went out to just general El Salvadorians and said, what do you want us to, we have this amazing technology stack where we can create, we have payment rails which are more efficient and faster than Visa network. What do you want? Like, what can we build to help you use this thing? And if you did say that to them, they would have said, we want stability, and then we want something, localized. And nobody did that. And I'm included in that group of people who didn't do that, or didn't do enough work on that in that regard.
Well, I think part of the reason that the people didn't do that or didn't back that project is they didn't see a cut for themselves in it. It's really about where are they going to get their percentage. And if you build a system that's too good, a system that works on its own, or a system that can be upkept for a very small amount of money, it's not going to fit with their plan, because they need a system with large upkeep. They need a system where they get a large percentage every month. And yeah, it just seems like that was the thing. And the same thing with why they would build by the volcano instead of rebuilding the existing city. They own the land by the volcano. They don't own the land in the existing city. They'd be fixing up someone else's land. They can only fix up things that they own. Similar to all back in the old day when Coinbase arrived, instead of building an open Bitcoin exchange or something open source or something like that, We built the closed Bitcoin exchange, the Facebook of Bitcoin exchanges, and we went from there. And then we said, well, can we build a worse one? You know, we can build a Binance, we can build a distributed octopus that moves around the world, and so on and so forth. And there's more there. Going back to this, I never went to El Salvador, so I don't have Stockholm syndrome like Ben. I'm not crying for the people and the beaches and the wonderful tacos and whatever else happened to you.
Papusas, baby. Papusas, not tacos.
Papusas, whatever. They're all the same thing. But I'll get in trouble for that too. But I'm sure the papusas are great. But I've been against this the whole time. Bitcoin never needed to be identified by a government. Bitcoin never cared that it was identified by a government. We don't need great men. We don't need great countries to spread Bitcoin. We have Bitcoin itself, which is great. And Bitcoin being spread person to person, man to man, software. And there we go. The only thing I was wrong about is that there was no giant rug pull by friends or family or the government. There's still time. Time is not running out. The IMF thing also could help. Maybe they have to bring the money out into the open, Ocean's 11 style, and they snatch it, and there's a big car chase.
I will say that Chivo was so incredibly bad, and I did hear rumors that it was Bukele's brother who was running the company, the Chivo company, allegedly rumors. So I wouldn't be surprised if they lost some sats. Like, we work on a Bitcoin wallet, Lightning wallet, and there are hackers out there, and they will attack you. I would be very surprised if Chivo Wallet hadn't lost money at some point. So yeah, when it comes to proving that they have the money which they say they have, or they say they have in Chivo, if IMF hold them to that, then I think they're going to really struggle.
Well, remember the other point of Chivo Wallet was that they could print a voucher. They said they were going to give every person in the country $10 in Bitcoin. And if you actually line that money up and sent it to accounts, that would be a lot of work and that would be a lot of money. It's a lot easier to say you get $10 in Bitcoin. Then only if you claim it do I have to send you the money. And then it's even easier if I don't send you the actual Bitcoin, but I put a $10 credit in your Chivo account, which again just breaks Bitcoin. And when you do things wrong like that from the beginning, people get used to it being broken. If you look at the beginning of curio cards, I was reading about our project again, we put all the curio cards into the vending machines. So if you want to buy them, if you're from the company, if you're from wherever, you buy them from the vending machine. So it's a fair start. And if you start things fairly from the beginning, people will expect fairness. Let's keep going. We got a couple more issues. We're kind of running long today, Ben. Issue number whatever, Craig Wright hit by general civil restraining order in the United Kingdom. What does that mean? Well, according to this, it says he cannot file new lawsuits in any UK court, county, high court, or court of appeal without explicit judicial approval. Given his past, this would be ultra difficult to get. Ben Ark, it looks like it's over for Craig Wright. No more ability to sue anybody, even if he has a white powdered wig.
So that's a restraining order against him being able to file lawsuits in the UK because he spammed. This is a rate limit or an IP blocker for Craig Wright being able to spam the legal server of the UK. Is this correct?
This is punishment for misuse of the network. I think specifically,
Craig Wright,
they talked about
scammer.
Presented false evidence. Well, let's not say that. You're allegedly a scammer.
Craig Wright's a scammer. We can say it now. We can say it in the UK. Okay, legally, we're allowed to say no allegedly nonsense. Craig Wright, you're a scammer. Fuck you, Craig Wright. Fuck Craig Wright. Fuck Craig Wright. We can say as much as we want now because he's not allowed to have legal action against anyone. We shall sing it from the towers, the castles.
He didn't invent Bitcoin, and he's not Satoshi Nakamoto. And again, he deserves this for his misuse of the court. He filed multiple evidence that seems to be falsified, the things with the wrong fonts on them, all that kind of stuff, the emails that were from the wrong dates, the dates were falsified. When you act in bad faith with the court in that manner, you deserve this kind of a legal punishment. So while some people might say maybe it's too much or they're taking away his freedoms, because he needs to shut Ben down for that whole middle finger dance thing, which was obviously satire and parody and absolutely hilarious.
It was real. It was real. Fuck you, Craig Wright. You're a
It was
scammer.
real.
Craig Wright's a scammer.
Just like Bill. Like,
I'm gonna leave and run around the streets shouting Craig Wright's a scammer.
Really smart, the anti-marketing dollar.
I'm a coward though. I mean, Peter McCormack said it when it was cool. You know, when it was when you could still be sued from Craig Wright, which you can't now. So
he did, and Wright has lost that power. But that's about it for that issue. We got a couple more. According to CoffeeZilla on YouTube as well as Twitter, he says Sam Bankman-Fried's plan if he got caught laughing out loud. Go on, Tucker Carlson, come out as a Republican. And according to another CoffeeZilla account on Twitter, it says Bankman-Fried had a Google document with ideas on how to get all of this. Just some of the document. File a document about Chapter 11 problems. Go with the lawyers were in a shitty situation and I feel bad. They reacted poorly. Go on, Tucker Carlson, come out as a Republican. Show how he had super PAC contributions, come out against the woke agenda, come out for freedom, attack the Chapter 11. Basically, they're doing a bad job and all that. What do you think, Thomas Hunt? Well, I think the horrible part about this is that it might have worked, right, Scooby? I mean, I think he could have gotten away with it if it weren't for those kids shutting it down too quickly. I think a lot of people have looked back. SBF, whether you like it or not, was a major holder of Solana. And I think he was holding around $10, $20 and it went to 250 or something. It's been crazy up. He could have sold and paid those people back. He could have sold on some of his other assets and paid those people back for that missing money. If he'd been able to keep all that information inside and no one had ever known what was in that black box, it's very possible that he could have surfed over those waves, even though he had all those bad bets and all the missing money and all the misused, miscategorized money. He could have gotten away with it. I think it would have worked. Ben Ark, what do you think? Freedom, liberty, Tucker Carlson? Ben is sharing screen. He's playing Warcraft. You're muted, Ben. Sam Bankman-Fried famously played League of Legends, I think it was, during a meeting. Ben, are you playing during this meeting? You want a bunch of VC capital now? I'm still muted, Ben.
Yeah, sorry. I was just playing League of Legends there. Like good old Sam Bankman-Fried in the VC meetings. So he's playing League of Legends, he's talking to the VCs, and at the same time he's writing his, I mean, clearly clever lad, you know, become a Republican. I mean, again, it shows where we are in the Bitcoin news cycle. The Sam Bankman-Fried story would still be a relevant story, but it doesn't seem to be these days. These days, the news cycle has moved on, and everyone's kind of forgotten about Sam Bankman-Fried. And but it is interesting that he had this document which he created in case he gets busted. And yeah, it's quite a find in his Google Docs. How did he get access to the Google Docs? CoffeeZilla.
It's tough to say. It might have been in the trial. Who knows? But yeah, I think if he could have gone away with it. I like the part, come out with a strong anti-Binance message. That's very good.
I like the bit which was like leak this document. It's kind of Inception. It's like you see the document being leaked and then you read the document, which then says leak out this document. And yeah.
I would say the only update that we've had on the SBF story lately has been that his parents are requesting a pardon. And similar to the Ross Ulbricht case, they think that Trump should just pardon him. But that's, again, remember, the Trump decisions are not based on moral decisions. He didn't pardon Ross because the drug war is over and it was all a mistake. He pardoned him because he was paid. So if SBF's parents want to pay him, similar to the way we saw Justin Sun from last week from Tron, he bought a great deal of World Liberty Financial shares and then he was freed. Perhaps if the Bankman-Fried still have some money in their Cayman bank accounts or whatever they may have been hiding out, perhaps they could purchase his freedom. It does seem a direct pay for play scenario. It is not a there's no it makes it simpler though. You know you can get what you want. You just have to pay. Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose with Ross, he had been in prison for 15 years. So that was quite a term he served. And he did look like, prison had taken its toll on him. But again, like all those shows where he said, free Ross Ulbricht, he's free.
Well, and the real question now, Ben, will be who will serve a longer jail time, Ross Ulbricht or Sam Bankman-Fried?
Well, oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right. Probably in a few years, he will be released. His parents do have some money in the coffers ready to spend.
Historically, we've been always been really weak on financial crime. The Ross Ulbricht story, for as much as it's an internet story, he makes a website, he's committing Bitcoin fraud, all of those things. Some drugs are sent to some people and some people get sick.
It's a classic white collar crime scenario where you have someone stealing a packet of biscuits from a shop and they end up on the floor with a policeman's knee in their back, and then you have someone who steals billions and they end up being carried away in their suit without handcuffs, and well, not carried away, they end up being escorted politely in their suit to a police car, and it's all quite hush-hush and no one gets hurt. So sadly, the judicial system has always favored the not white collar criminals, but the criminals who have the means to have political sway. But I do feel with Sam Bankman-Fried, there's just so much evidence that what he did was so apparent, and he just embezzled and stole money, and stole rich people's money too. So you never steal rich people's money. I think that's the message here.
It was the message of the movie The Paper as well. And it will be interesting to see how it turns out, who serves more time. I think we're running out of time. We got one more quick story. In things that are also hard to believe, Ben, check this out. Shout out to Frank Corva, who says on Twitter, "I'll be covering the White House Crypto Summit for Bitcoin Magazine as part of the White House Press Pool today. Stay tuned for updates." We've also got Sander Lutz, who says, "Exciting news. I will be reporting on crypto from the White House for Decrypt Media moving forward and on the ground representing the industry at today's Crypto Summit." Just incredible, amazing to be in this time where crypto reporters are in the White House, I assume just for the Crypto Summit. But for all I know, they could have added these guys to the regular White House press pool, and they're going to file reports regularly. Ben, just really quick, what do you think on what it is to have come so far? Even if we're in disagreement with this administration, they're allowing in crypto reporters. Amazing.
Now, Thomas, I've heard that you have a back channel to Mad Bitcoins, and I would like to ask why he isn't also being recruited for the to the White House press, whatever you call them.
We obviously should have asked. We have if they were going by just years of experience in Bitcoin media, we have the most years of experience. So that would have worked.
I think maybe if you reach out to Mad Bitcoins and ask him.
It's so cold in Washington, D.C. You probably have to live in Virginia or something. You take the metro in. It sounds very inconvenient. The White House press pool also is literally on top of a pool. William Howard Taft used to have a pool under there, and they built a floor, and they have a floor on top of it. And there's no more pool.
Is that what it is? Is that why it's called the press pool? No,
it might be. I mean, it might be called a pool as well, but literally ours is previously on top of a pool. But I don't think
so my Bitcoins, as we all know, can't go too near water.
And it's cold in DC. But no, it would have been great if they would have let me cover it from the press.
Not you, Thomas. Mad Bitcoins.
Heather Thomas, Mad Bitcoins, out of the hat and the goggles, the whole thing.
Well, I'd like to say,
What a thing! What a thing!
I think maybe Mad Bitcoins should make a video where he asks a question, and then the camera cuts to Mad Bitcoins in the press pool, in this press swimming pool.
We'll have to see if Trump does a news conference today about the crypto summit. If they say anything good, maybe we can bounce off and bounce into it.
I mean, you could have a yes, Mad Bitcoins, what would you like to ask? And then it turns to Mad Bitcoins and he's like, oh, I would just like to say that curio cards, I've heard, should probably be in the Bitcoin strategic reserve. And then you can stick it out there on YouTube.
They did one of those today. It was, let's see if I can pull it up. It was Vitalik, and he was in the Oval Office, and he was wearing a Curio Cards t-shirt. And you know how it is in this world of deep fakes and everything. You know, you can believe what you want to believe, but I look at this and I believe it's real. I look at this and I say, he's never looked better.
Has he got an erection? No, I don't believe it's Vitalik.
He looks pretty flat, but how cool. He does have Curio Cards.
That's good. Good stuff.
I think, Ben, we're running out of time. So do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Not really, man. I mean, it's been one of them weeks, to be honest, where I've just been walking through sludge, so I've got nothing to show for it. Prediction, no, I've got nothing. Prediction, I mean, hopefully the world won't end before next week's show. That's not my prediction, but my hope for next week.
A whole 7 days, like keeping the
no
government.
Nuclear war. I mean, there's that book, isn't there, by that? Who's that author? Who's, you'll know, Thomas. You're a well-read chap. That book about the Third World War and the nuclear war and how it lasts 2.5 hours, and then humanity's set right back. Do you know the book by a female author? It's basically the scenario of when someone fires the first nuke, and then the Third World War takes 2.5 hours for humanity to be ended.
No, I think that just reminds me of the old quote where it's, World War II was fought with missiles and planes, and World War III will be fought with thermonuclear weapons, and World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
That's Einstein, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah, that kind of idea. But going back to the positive, Ben, we want to stay positive here at the end of the show. The Big Lebowski was released on this date in 1998. How about that? The Big Lebowski, 27 years of Lebowski. Just an amazing film. If you haven't seen it, I remember I was there watching it in the theater with my buddies in college, and our entire row was just cackling and laughing, like bended over, like in pain from laughing too much. And the rest of the people, and there weren't that many in the audience, there were 5-10 other people, they weren't really getting it. They weren't getting it the way that we were getting it. So maybe it takes a certain kind of person to enjoy Lebowski, but it's a great film, The Big Lebowski. Many people have said it's perhaps a metaphor for American immigration, the melting pot of cultures, as the Polish man, Lebowski, Karabatsov, Donnie, so many others, the Jesus, the Mexican man, Liam, the Irishman, so many people mixed together, Pilar, et cetera, et cetera. Truly a great American film, The Big Lebowski.
All fighting the Germans.
Exactly, all fighting the Germans, World War II, the nihilists, the whole thing wrapped in The Big Sleep, the classic Humphrey Bogart film. And just fun, just fun.
It was a beautiful film. There's the one rule in filmmaking is you don't use narration unless it's The Big Lebowski. The Big Lebowski could use narration. Any other film you can't use it. It's cheating. You should just tell the story through the lens and through the script. But The Big Lebowski pulls off, in cinema history, just the best narration.
Well, I still love narration. I think it can be lazy and it can be a cover. Like in Blade Runner, they redid the film with the narration to try to fix it, and in many ways did fix it. But with Lebowski, that's the other interpretation. It could be the immigration melting pot, everyone coming together, even Maude with her fake British accent, the American fake British people coming together, is that with the narration, the narrator represents the West. Sam is the cowboy. He is the Old West. And the dude, the surfer, the stoner, the laid-back character, he is the New West. So we see the cowboy meeting up with the dude. And those are some of the best scenes, the two scenes at the bar, where he says, do you have to curse so much? He wouldn't have cursed so much in the past, but the dude doesn't understand that. And also in the introduction, when he says, dude, a name that no one would self-apply where I come from. Because, dude and a cowboy means an amateur, means a dude ranch, children playing on horses.
I kind of thought that isn't he God in the film? I always thought that he was God. And that Lebowski, he was, because he was kind of God. No, is that not right?
I always see it as a Western analogy. In the beginning, he is the tumbling tumblewood. He is the old cowboy analogy, and the cowboy represented the West. And that now the West is represented by Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is a melting pot. And kind of the king of the Los Angeles, the laziest of all laziest, is the dude. So this kind of slacker character is the icon of the West now, not the cowboy.
The dude abides.
Because he's a slacker. He doesn't care. I mean, he's the exact opposite of the big Lebowski, who is a businessman and who is also a fraud, right? If we take the big Lebowski as Trump, he is a false businessman. He is perhaps even not even in the wheelchair. That could be a fraud as well. But as Maud says, the money was all mother's. He inherited all the money. So he is a fraud. Whereas Lebowski, he might have 89 cents on a check at Ralph's. He has no money in his banking account. He doesn't know how to pay his rent on time, all of these things as a slacker, but he is authentic. And I think that's what Sam Elliott, the cowboy, sees in Lebowski when he hands it off, because the cowboy should disagree with the slacker. In many ways, there should be a conflict there, but it's a smooth handoff, right? He sees the value of the dude. He sees the inherent goodness of the slacker.
The virtue in the dude compared
virtue
to
and laziness, the Tao of Steve. And he allows for the culture to be handed off. And since then, well, in many ways, though, maybe we're being punished for the dude, for being so hands off, for being so laid back, allowing the government to go Soviet. Maybe if we had a more cowboy John Wayne type attitude, we would say we shouldn't allow our country to do this. But the ship has sailed. So
maybe I'm going to go watch The Big Lebowski.
I think everyone should celebrate the Lebowski. We're running out of time, so thanks to everybody for joining us. Give us a thumbs up down below. Hello to everybody in the chat. Send us a wave if you made it this far, and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be here again next week, at least until they stop us. So until next time, bye.